First Person is produced in cooperation with the Far East Broadcasting Company, who rejoice in the stories of changed lives through the power of Jesus Christ. Learn more at febc.org.
I'd been in ministry before. I'd lived overseas before as a missionary. I'd managed the incredibly difficult and challenging healthcare world here in California. But God has a unique way of finding creative ways to challenge us and force us to grow.
We'll explore the faith journey of Jonathan Hallsted now on First Person. He went from the business side of healthcare to providing healthcare as a kingdom mission and a bridge to the gospel. Welcome to First Person. I'm Wayne Shepherd. Before we start the conversation, though, a quick reminder that these First Person interviews are not only available on radio, but also streamed online and available as a podcast. You'll find us at firstpersoninterview.com. And for the podcast, just use your podcast app and search for First Person Interview with Wayne Shepherd. Then subscribe for automatic delivery each week. John Hallsted is the founder and executive director of HealthBridge Global, a ministry dedicated to the power of healthcare ministry to carry the gospel to closed nations, closed cultures, and closed hearts. They believe meeting medical needs in the spirit and name of Christ builds bridges for true gospel impact and the transformation of people and communities. Let's meet John. His journey to this mission was not a straight line.
A good friend of mine reminds me often of the phrase, always forward, but rarely straight. And that's actually meant quite a bit to me at different times in my life. I have a few seasons to my life. I did spend about 5 years in pastoral ministry pretty early on, and that was in an associate role. We have 7 years as a family, missionaries living overseas. I have about 15 years of healthcare management career here in California, managing private practices, mostly for eye surgeons. And a number of years ago, about coming on 5 years now, God challenged me to devote myself full-time to international healthcare missions work. So, kind of 4 distinct seasons to my life, and I didn't really anticipate any of them when they came, but somehow God is really woven them together into something meaningful. And I can see how each of those previous seasons, pastoral ministry, my time in business, my time overseas, each of those were really critical ingredients to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, they all add up and count towards God's ultimate plan for you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, where did you serve as a missionary, by the way?
We were in Eastern Europe, and we were there primarily, again, medically focused. We were there to support doctors, Christian doctors who had a vision, a calling to impact their communities with healthcare and the gospel. And so we were just there to come alongside them, using the same experience I had in the business world, which was management, everything from HR, legal, credentialing, compliance, accounting, all the stuff that doctors have to think about, whether they're doing work for the Lord or not, whether they're Christian or not. You have to answer those kinds of problems in medical work. And so we were there to help them with that.
Yeah. Well, yours is a great story because obviously a career in business can be a ministry as well. But a lot of people are listening, wondering what God has for them. And I think you talking about the process you went through is going to be very helpful. So after a few years, you sensed that something was changing. You actually sold your house and left your job because you thought something was up?
Yeah. It was right around early 2021. And I think some of us remember what was happening in that time. I don't know how it was for you, but out here in California, this thing COVID was a pretty big deal. A lot of life shut down. And so I found myself with a lot more time to take walks. And we had this beautiful little tree-covered trail right near my house. It was about 1.5 miles, 2 miles long, and I would walk that at least once, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day during COVID. And on one of those walks, I had this distinct sense, and I do not get these kinds of senses or feelings. I'm not one of those people that I feel God is speaking to me all the time. But in this case, I felt something I couldn't ignore. And it was a sense that I should sell my house and quit my job. And it was strong enough that I literally stopped walking on the trail. I was almost physically arrested and stopped. And then when I got home, I told my wife about it. And, a good wife would talk their husband out of that. No, honey, we should not sell the house. No, you should not quit your
Are
job.
you sure?
But yeah, but her answer was basically one word. She said, "Okay."
Hmm.
And so we started a process of selling her house, and I kind of soft resigned from my job. I was number two in the company, so I had to find a replacement. There was a lot of things I had to do if I was going to leave the job, but we started that process. And personally, I thought it was because I was going to go find a better job.
Hmm.
My oldest daughter, we have four children. My oldest daughter was getting ready to go to college. I had three more behind her, and I'm good enough at math to know I was about to embark
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
probably the most 15 expensive years of my life. Um, and I thought it was time for an upgrade. I thought it was time, let's make some more money. Let's make a career shift in the upward direction. And God made it clear over the course of a couple of weeks that He was asking me to make those two changes because He wanted me to focus my attention and my time full time on a ministry that we had started 10 years prior.
Hmm.
We had launched our organization 10 years prior and just ran it bivocationally, nights and weekends. It was a labor of love. I never had any intention of trying to create a job for myself or doing it full time. And so when God told me, that's what I'd like you to do, you already have a job, and this is what I'd like you to do. Between you and me, I was actually pretty resistant for a couple of months.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. I appreciate you telling the story of how God didn't audibly speak to you, but there was just that sensation that this is what God has for me. I had a similar experience one time. It's hard to put into words, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so you sold your house, you left your job, and what happened?
We did sell our house, and that happened quite quickly because houses were selling quite quickly during COVID, especially out here in California. And so I started looking for work, and I had a couple of opportunities, good opportunities in just non-ministry oriented jobs. Although that's another conversation whether everything is ministry or could be ministry. But
Right.
these were just secular companies that I was looking for employment in. And that's when God challenged me and said, no, I think you have a job. This is what I'd like you to do. And my resistance to say yes to that quickly came from about a million different reasons in my mind. But I could distill them all down into two reasons: fear and money.
Mm-hmm.
I was afraid. I was afraid of failing. If you're doing something as a hobby, if you're doing something part-time, if you're doing something as a volunteer, you're not really on the hook. You can't really fail. But as soon as you say, I'm all in, I'm doing this, God's called me to do this, then that raises the stakes a little bit. And I was nervous about that. I didn't know if I wanted that level of commitment. But I was also concerned about money. I wasn't sure, how am I going to feed my family? I didn't know what it would mean, but I knew it would mean a pay cut. That was pretty clear. Going from the business world and healthcare in California to running a nonprofit that I had started, and I was aware of the fact that I was going to have to raise every single penny myself. And who grows up wanting to be a fundraiser as a kid? Nobody wants to be a fundraiser. But I realized if I'm going to do this, it means A, I'm going to have to take a pay cut. B, I'm going to have to raise all that money. And now I'm also on the hook to succeed. And none of that sounded attractive to me. But there was a day, a couple of months into that process of wrestling with God when, again, I was on that trail because I walked that trail a lot. And I felt like the Lord kind of encouraged me by saying, listen, you don't have to do this. This is not a have to. This is a get to. And if you choose another path, if you choose to stay where you are, you want to keep the job you have, or you want to take one of these other job opportunities that are starting to come together, I won't be mad at you. I want what's best for you. I understand the fear. I understand the money thing. Those are real. I won't be mad at you, John. But if you'll trust me, I'd love to show you what I can do. And I don't know if he was using reverse psychology on me or not, but there was something about like that pressure that was gone. And it was no longer, I wasn't feeling like, oh, God wants me to do something that I don't want to do anymore. It really created freedom in a way to respond with obedience and to say, well, wait a minute, maybe I do want to see what you would do if I said yes to this. It was like that old game show. I can't remember what it's called, but there's like 3 doors, and they show you what's behind door number 1, and it's a pretty nice prize. Behind door number 1, you don't know. It could be something better, something worse. And then behind one of the other doors, it's something amazing. But you got to take a risk. Am I going to keep what I know could be mine, or am I going to risk something smaller or something greater? And I felt like the Lord said, you already know what's behind 2 of these doors, a different job, a better job, your current job, but you don't really know what's behind door number 3, and I'd love to show you. And so it was literally that afternoon I said yes.
Wonderful.
And here I am now.
Well, that process, I'm sure, included lots of prayer and time in the Word, perhaps some mentors along the way as well. People have a part. Your wife indeed played a part in this, I'm sure.
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, my wife and I constantly having practical conversations. What will this mean? What will we have to do? What has to change? But also, is this really what God wants? And just making sure that we were on the same page. It has big implications for your children, and for their future. We had to tell our kids, that some of the things that we had told them we would help them with college, we were not going to be able to do all of that anymore. So we had to talk through all that stuff. But with friends, yes, I called a handful of friends, and I shared with them what I was thinking of doing. And I said, if I say yes to this, I just need to know you're on my team. I'm not asking you to give me money. I'm not asking you for anything like that. I just need to know that you have my back and that I can reach out to you anytime during this process if I need help. And all my friends were incredibly encouraging, but one in particular, I'm not going to say his name, but he's one of those former special ops Army guys, that goes in and does really difficult things in really difficult places. It tries to keep the world a little safer with every mission. He's one of those guys. He said to me, John, just do it already. He said, come on, just go, man. Stop hesitating. All my other friends were encouraging me with scripture and, telling me God's got this. And I needed to hear that. But you know what? It was his final encouragement. He just kind of pushed me off the ledge. And I needed that, actually.
We're learning about the calling of John Hallsted to Health Bridge Global. We'll continue with John in just a moment.
I'm Ed Cannon of the Far East Broadcasting Company, and we're happy to help Wayne provide these first-person interviews to you each week. In addition to the program you're listening to, Wayne joins me in hosting a weekly podcast called Until All Have Heard, telling the remarkable stories of the Far East Broadcasting Company. You'll learn how God is using FEBC to proclaim the gospel in all forms of technology available. We're committed to continue taking Christ to the world. Join us at febc.org to listen to Until All Have Heard. Now let's return to First Person.
My guest is Jonathan Hallsted. Jonathan is founder and president of Health Bridge Global, which is the ministry that started, as you've heard, kind of on a part-time basis, kind of as a volunteer, but God led him into a much deeper involvement, a full-time involvement, a risk-taking involvement in this ministry, Health Bridge Global. So let's talk about what it is that you do and how it's helpful in today's world.
We partner with local indigenous doctors around the world who have a vision and a calling to close healthcare gaps in their community and infuse the gospel in very strategic and intentional ways and create healthcare solutions that are financially viable so that they can sustain their own operations. So there's kind of 4 key components hidden in that. Maybe people picked up on them, but local leaders, we're not relying usually on Western missionaries, but rather indigenous leaders who are healthcare leaders and fixing healthcare problems, intentional about the gospel, and entrepreneurial in their thinking. So that if we build something together, we don't have to feed it for the next 50 years to keep it open. They have the capacity to pay their staff, pay their bills, keep up with inflation, and keep it running. So these are usually capital projects. We want to create something that's going to create a healthcare shift in a nation. And every country is different. Every project is different because they're tailored to the exact needs of that community and the exact calling, specialty, and capacity of those leaders.
Before you go on with a list, what would be some examples? Does it mean a clinic? What does it mean?
Yeah, most of our projects do end up resulting in a clinic of some sort. Some of them are different. We have a project right now in a country that I can't name in Central Asia, and that is a technology and equipment project. So we're taking a clinic run by a bunch of Christian operators, and we're elevating them into the 21st century, helping them with networking, imaging equipment, and some things like that. But most of our projects are physical in nature, ranging everywhere from maternity health and a pro-life clinic in one of the former abortion capitals of the world to a pediatric spinal rehabilitation facility. We did a mental health project for state institutionalized orphans. We have some are just general community clinics in cities that are intended to be, primary care, dentistry, vision care. We have a project in India that is a mobile healthcare project that is supporting church planters in rural villages. So they're using healthcare to gain entry, build trust, and maintain access to villages that otherwise may be hostile or just unwelcoming.
Sounds wonderful, and it sounds rewarding at the same time. I interrupted you when you were talking about the list of distinctives. You work with indigenous doctors and healthcare professionals. What are some of the other distinctives of HealthBridge Global?
Yeah, I would say they all kind of fall into that list. And one is that we are what we would call intentional and gospel strategic. What I mean by that is that we're not just partnering with nice Christian doctors. As wonderful people as nice Christian doctors are, we're partnering with intentional, gospel-minded doctors. So they are within the confines of their culture and within the confines of maybe the religious system that they find themselves living in, the predominant religious system. They are finding unique, creative, strategic ways to infuse the gospel into that healthcare. That's going to look different, of course, in a Hindu nation than it will in a Muslim nation, than it will in a post-Christian nation like Eastern Europe. That's going to play out very differently, but the intentionality is key. And then the last probably significant distinctive is that coming from the healthcare field, having worked in healthcare for almost 2 decades here in the U.S., I understand that healthcare is not free. It always has to be paid for. And generally, it's best when the patient hands the doctor money and the doctor provides care for the patient. And it's hard for us in the United States to understand how that can happen because our healthcare expenses seem just so out of proportion. None of us can imagine walking into a healthcare provider and just paying cash.
Right.
But in most countries around the world, it's a very nominal and very transparent transaction. And so at our clinic in Egypt, somebody might pay $7 for a visit. In Eastern Europe, it might be $20. In a even poorer nation, maybe in Central Asia, it might just be $1 or $2. But all of our projects are set up to be what we call micro profitable or at least financially viable. No one's getting rich. There's no money coming back to the United States, but they're able to sustain their operations, have a rainy day fund, pay their staff. And that is really, really important if we want to have a long-term impact. And my hope is I don't want to start one thing and then feed it for the next 50 years. I want to start something, and then I want to be able to redeploy our time, our energy, and financial resources to do another one and another one and another one. The vision God gave me 5 years ago when I finally said yes to this full time, the vision he gave me was 20 gospel-centric healthcare projects in 10 countries in the first 10 years.
Okay.
So we're 5 years in, and we're sitting at 13 right now with what we've completed and with what we have ongoing. Kind of on track there, but everyone is different. Everyone's a unique adventure.
That's a great report. Talk more about how the gospel is manifest in these situations. Use an example. I understand that with cultural concerns, you can't give all the specifics, but give us a good example of how the gospel goes forward through this effort.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 as a good contrast, maybe. One of our projects is in a completely closed nation in Northeast Asia. Most listeners could probably guess where that is, but that strategy there is what we would call a long game. It's about presence. It's about being available, having a Christian presence in high levels of medical leadership. There's some amazing stories that come out of that. There's prayer that happens directly. There are questions that get asked, but it's obviously a very delicate situation that has to be walked a little bit like a tightrope. In one of our other projects in a predominantly Muslim nation, the doctors still take a pretty direct approach. In fact, doctors will often sit with a patient and say something along the lines of, I'm a Christian doctor. I'm a follower of Isa. And even as a good Muslim, that the Quran talks about Isa as a healer. Well, we believe that Isa is alive. He still heals. Would it be okay if I pray for you? I want you to take this medicine. We're also going to have this follow-up visit. We're going to run some tests, but could I pray for you in the name of Isa that he would heal you? And the answer to that question, 99% of the time, is yes. And our doctor partners overseas have seen healing, and have seen Muslims come to faith because of miraculous things that have happened to them, both physically, I would say both mentally, in their mental health state as well. And so the doctors, in the right time, the right place, when they sense there's an open door, they can be quite bold.
Yeah. Well, I applaud your commitment to the gospel in all of this. It's really commendable, and that's what it's all about. Because you can heal a body, but eventually that body's going to die. And what's going to happen to that person after death is what's ultimately most important, right? Eternal things. So, any regrets about doing what you did to take that step, that risk of a faith ministry, really? How's that working out for you?
This is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's the best thing I've ever done. So there's those days when I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, what have I gotten myself into? Why did I say yes to this? And that's usually because I feel pressure, right? Sure. I feel pressure to succeed. I feel maybe there's financial strain in that particular week or month. But there's other days, and they're usually back to back, when I wake up in the morning and I pinch myself and I go, I cannot believe I get to do this. So no regrets. It's been a learning process. I thought I'd been in ministry before. I'd lived overseas before as a missionary. I'd managed the incredibly difficult and challenging healthcare world here in California. I didn't think that this would be that difficult, but God has a unique way of finding creative ways to challenge us and force us to grow. And so this has been a very difficult, challenging, but extremely rewarding season of life.
Well, God has given our guest, John Hallsted, and his wife, Becca, a unique calling to use healthcare around the world as a means of proclaiming the gospel. And you can learn more about it with links you'll find at firstpersoninterview.com. I'm grateful to our broadcast partner who makes First Person possible, the Far East Broadcasting Company. FEBC takes Christ to the world through radio and new technology, and millions respond after hearing God's Word, many for the first time. Show your thanks for First Person by visiting febc.org. You'll be able to view video testimonies of changed lives because of FEBC's ministry, and you'll find our podcast there called Until All Have Heard with Ed Cannon, also available at any podcast app. Check it out today at febc.org. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Thanks for listening to First Person.